that the winner of the football's next star is Ben.
On this episode of Lives in the Game, we're joined by Football's Next Star winner Ben Greenhalgh as he talks us through his career, winning the competition and all the ups and downs.
That sort of 7 weeks that we were out there in Italy for the programme was probably the best 7 weeks because life was never going to be that way. They chose 20 players on the day to play in a match and I was one of those players. And then as that game began, I see Jamie Redknapp walk through the Astro and turn up in the dugout. So then I realised that this was something serious.
What was Jose Mourinho like with you?
With me, he was good. He was really good, to be honest. He just always positive, always had a smile on his face. But we did have, I remember the manager came in, and this was late on. Obviously, we were in such bad money problems. I think this is why he did it. I think this is why it ended up happening. He came in and said, "We need to draw today's game."
What was Balotelli like?
He's a 21-year-old. Might have even been 21. Might have been 20 years old. Sitting on the bench. He comes on for the last 10 minutes. Got through to the Champions League final. You've just beaten Barcelona. Everyone's buzzing in the San Siro. It's all going crazy. He takes off his top, spits on it, and throws it in the crowd. And it's just because he hadn't started the game.
Hello everyone, welcome to for a very special Lives in the Game. Delighted to be joined by Ben Greenhalgh here on Lives in the Game. You may know him from the football show Football's Next Star, which was on Sky One. Ultimately, Ben won the competition and he got a contract with Inter Milan. Bit of a throwback that one, but Ben, thank you for joining us today. I hope you're well as well.
That's fine, yeah.
So how are you actually finding self-isolation before we start with the video?
It's been quite good, to be honest, because we've just had a newborn baby. So it's our first baby. He's 8 weeks old, and I probably wouldn't have had anywhere near the time to spend with him because obviously the way football is, it's all day, every day for me at the moment. So I would have been coming home late and not seeing too much of him. So it's good to spend all the day with him, and yeah, I've never really had this sort of time off because of football as well. Obviously, it's not ideal with what's going on and everything outside of here, but within the household, it's been quite relaxed and been quite enjoyable.
It's always nice to see someone actually benefiting from social isolation and getting that time. So we're going to be talking through your career, Ben, and obviously where you're at now and what you plan to do in the future. But like we said, you are known for winning Football's Next Star on Sky One. You got a contract with Inter Milan. So let's talk about that experience first. Firstly, what made you apply, and did you expect to even get that far in the competition?
Well, originally we went with I was playing for the Kent County team, and it was Ken Brook, the manager, and he just took us along. He took us along as a sort of training session, and we had no idea what was going on. And we turned up. We saw cameras everywhere. We saw pictures of Vieira, pictures of Inter Milan players, Inter Milan flags everywhere. And we didn't really understand what was going on because there hadn't really been a show like it before. There'd been Football Idol years before. Football Icon years before that. But nothing to do with this, and no reality TV within football. So we ended up I remember just being relaxed, having a bit of a laugh. And then I was lucky enough that throughout the training session, they chose 20 players on the day to play in a match, and I was one of those players. And then as that game began, I see Jamie Redknapp walk through the Astro and turn up in the dugout. So then I realised that this was something serious, and it made me turn it on a little bit, made me want to impress him, made me want to make sure I've shown the best of myself. And I was lucky enough at the end of that day that Jamie Redknapp called me out as the one player, and I went through to the next round. And I think from there onwards, in some ways I surprised myself because I was quite confident with just going the whole way. I was never in an arrogant way thinking I'm going to win the show, but I think Jamie Redknapp gave me that confidence because on that day he gave me his mobile number. He asked me what I was doing in football, for the next sort of month while we were waiting for the next stage of the process, he was ringing me every few days because at the time I was 16 and I was signing for Welling, and I remember actually getting quite a bit of advice of him, going, should I be doing this? Should I be signing here? Is it going to cause any problems with the show? And he was really good. So I think that gave me the confidence to think, you know what, if I've got Jamie Redknapp giving me his phone number and ringing me every week, then it made me think I've got a chance in the show.
With a lot of football shows, that's really good about Jamie Redknapp, because you expect that they just, see it as a little bit of a job. They don't get too involved. But what was Jamie Redknapp actually like as a mentor?
He was really good, to be honest. I think he was good for everyone. I might be a little bit biased because obviously he did give me that little bit of extra time. But no, I know exactly what you mean. I've worked in a lot of football adverts before where the main player comes in and he turns up for 5 minutes. He doesn't give you much attention and he ends up doing what he has to do and he leaves while everyone else does all the hard work. But he was Italy. He was out there when we were there 2 or 3 days every week. I remember I've got pictures of just sitting there in a restaurant with him. He wouldn't go off and eat on his own. He'd stay with us. He'd play table tennis with us. We had a good table tennis battle, me and him and Connor. We had a good 3-way table tennis battle. So he was really good. He was really involved. And like I said, before and after the show, he kept in contact. He kept asking what was going on. He kept trying to give as much advice as he could. Obviously, with Jamie, he's got the contacts, but at the same time, he's not in that side of football. He's in the punditry side, the celebrity side of it. So he might not have as much time to have done all that if he had been like his dad and been manager of Tottenham, because you wouldn't be able to give all of us that sort of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Italy. So you did go out and live in Italy, which to go from not even knowing you're applying for a show to, now you're living in Italy, fighting for a contract with Inter Milan. At such a young age as well, like you said, 16. How did you find moving to Italy? Did you struggle or did you just relish in the opportunity?
Yeah, to be honest, it's one of those situations where I think I knew I had such a good thing ahead of me, a massive opportunity that I was just enjoying every moment. And especially while the show was going on and we were in the final 10, it was just all about getting to the next week. I remember every week while we were training, all we'd think about, all the nerves would be for just staying in the programme, moving on to the next week. And it was only for little things. It wasn't, I don't remember thinking at the time going, I desperately want to win this show to play for Inter Milan. I just remember thinking, I want to be here next week. I don't want to leave the competition now. I want to keep this journey going, because that sort of 7 weeks that we were out there in Italy for the programme was probably the best 7 weeks, because life was never going to be that way. You were never going to have a camera everywhere showing you different places, taking you to the best places here, going and seeing George Clooney's house in Lake Como, little things like that. It took us to the completely next level. Living on Lake Como on the edge of the lake, never going to experience that. Unless you became the best footballer in the world, you're never going to experience that. So it was something that I was enjoying so much, and I just wanted to keep going.
What was the atmosphere like with the other lads? Because as much as you're probably all getting on, but obviously you were all fighting each other as well.
Yeah, it was very much like a football changing room. You're all mates, you're all like a family, but then at the same time, you're playing against someone else for that position. There's always some people in the change room that's going to get dropped and not make the squad or be on the bench. So there's always that little bit of rivalry, and we did get along well. There were a couple of moments where some of the boys maybe had a bit of a falling out with each other, which you're going to do. You're 16, 17, there's 10 of you in a house. They had a bit of a falling out with each other, but we had our little group. So I got along with the Irish boys really well. And obviously I think all three of them made it to the final 5. So it did become very much like you felt for the boys that, like, I remember being gutted for Nathan and Reece, who and Jordan went out in the first few weeks. It was just like, it was brutal. It was like, they've come out here, they've been part of us, they've been such nice lads, and now they're just going home. And it's X Factor. That's what it is. It's the football version of X Factor. And you think at that time everything is on top of the world, and as soon as you're out, as soon as the cameras and marker tells you you're done, I remember just seeing faces. It was like everything had finished, and the cameras didn't help, because it could take an hour or 2 hours. It's not like on the X Factor where it's done within a few minutes because it's live. It could take a few hours just to show who's in the danger zone and let them, because of all their different camera angles they wanted, to actually get put into the danger zone and leave.
Do you still keep in touch with some of the lads from the show?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few of them on Twitter. I've got quite a few of them on Facebook. Not as much as in terms of going and seeing them. If we went and saw them, if I went and met any of them in the pub, it would be brilliant. Do you know what I mean? We'd get along like we used to. But that's not just because of the way we were there. I think, looking back at my career, all the teams that I've been a part of, you've been best mates with players. You still sort of follow each other, half talk to each other every now and then. But you go from being best mates to not seeing each other at all. And it's a very strange side of football that no one really sees, because I look at, like, when I was in Inverness, and all of those boys, they were like your family because you were up there. That's where you were. That's where you were living. You were living with them, and they were in the same situation. And then suddenly, as soon as one player leaves, or as soon as you leave, contact's still there, but not in the same way. So football's very much like that, and I think you've got to have a bit of a thick skin to be able to move on.
So you won the competition, which was an amazing watch. You got a 6-month contract initially with Inter Milan. What was it actually like to be a player at Inter Milan after winning this competition, which, like you said, you didn't even know you were signing up for at the start?
It was, yeah, to be honest, it was a surprise myself looking back at it now, because I think maybe if I'd been sent to Arsenal or something like that, I think I'd been a little bit more shell-shocked and a little bit more surprised with what was going on. But because I was already out of my comfort zone, and I was already in a different country in a foreign language, that I felt I just sort of had to get on with it. And I knew it was different because of all of that. It wasn't just different because I've gone from playing football in England to suddenly playing for Inter Milan. It was just very much, the whole change was different. I got my head down and tried moving on.
How did you handle the language barrier as well? Obviously, I know you on the show you learned Italian. Did you manage to get quite far in learning Italian to speak with the likes of, Vieira?
The stuff we learned on the show, and I remember there was a spell after I won the show, before I went out to Italy. I was going back to the Dartwood school, which is where I was at, and doing Italian lessons with one of the foreign languages teachers. And you think you've learned a lot, you think you know what's going on, then suddenly you get chucked in the deep end and you can't keep up at all. You've got no idea what anyone's saying. The pace of it all is just mental in Italy. And I think that was one thing I struggled with the most, especially at Inter Milan, because there were so many foreign players like myself playing over there. You end up getting in groups, and I think that you can see what happens like at Man City. That Aguero's been in England for 6-7 years, and he's only just started doing interviews in English. And that's probably because he's been in groups where he's talking Spanish to everyone. So I find myself, when I was out there, I was with the Serbian boys, the Swedish boys, a lot of Eastern European boys that were playing for Inter Milan at the time. And I found myself just in that group talking English to them. And it didn't seem too different in terms of the language barrier. But then suddenly you're on the training field and you've got this Italian coach. And to be honest, I'm sure everyone will tell you, we've sort of seen it from an outside point of view of Sarri and Conte and Italian managers like this. They're absolutely mental, and they're saying stuff to you that you just can't comprehend and you can't understand, because the stuff that they say in Italian, if you then translate it into English, and I remember doing that, I asked one of the boys, he's just shouted at me and I've got no idea what's going on. He's just shouted at me and said something, and I asked the boys what it means, and what it meant in English was terrible, and I couldn't get my head around it. But obviously in Italy, that's the way they deal with things. It's the way that's the way that they talk to each other. It's the way that they manage. And that was probably the hardest bit, is I never really had a relationship with the Inter Milan reserve manager, simply because of that, because he couldn't speak a word of English. And I, at the time, couldn't speak a word of Italian. But I then went out on loan to Como, went on loan for 4 months. Same thing started to happen. I remember doing a training drill where I was the example, which is obviously stupid enough anyway, because I'm probably one of the only boys that can't speak Italian. And he's asked to throw it in at his chest. So I've just lobbed it in at his feet, and he's volleyed it back at me. And I was like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
I've lobbed it in again, and he's volleyed it back again. I was like, I'm not really sure what this drill is. And the third one, I've lobbed at him, and he smashed it as hard as he can at me from about 4 yards away. Picked up all the cones and gone, let's move on. And I was just like, got no idea what's just happened. I remember half trying to talk to Italian to some of the boys. But then the thing was, because I got chucked in that deep end, about 3 weeks' time, I suddenly got the language. Very much like when you're a baby and you learn English, it was like that. I had to learn it because I've got everyone left, right, and centre speaking Italian and can't speak English to me. And as soon as I learnt that Italian, I actually ended up having a really good relationship with that manager at Como, and I had a really good time there. So it was very much, I wish I'd known the language straight away, because then you could, I think that's the main thing. How do you build a relationship with someone without speaking their language?
It must have been so tough. You mentioned Como. You actually had a prolific spell there, didn't you? 8 and 12, 8 goals.
Yeah, I actually did really well. I mean, I remember playing as a left wing back as well. It was one of the first times I think I'd played in my career, and it was probably coming into the game at the time where it was a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2, and it definitely suited me because I like to run up and down, obviously left-footed, and it was just basically get the ball, run down the wing and cross it, and then from the other side see if I can get involved and get some goals. And yeah, and it was definitely one of my good scoring. I think I scored 4 free kicks for them, which was going well, and scored a couple other goals. I remember scoring against the Milan B team at the time, and that was out in Milan, and it was a good goal scoring record, and I was actually really enjoying my time there. We were living by Como, playing in Lake Como. The ground is literally right on the edge of Lake Como, but it was just there was match fixing, there was money scandals, and I was on loan, so I was still getting paid. But I remember getting to Christmas, the whole season from August to Christmas, none of the boys had been paid, and obviously for me, it was okay for me because, like I said, I was getting my money from Inter Milan, so I could afford to be living out there and do the usual things. But if I then left Inter Milan and went and stayed with Como, I'm then suddenly got to pay for everything out there because I don't have my family out there, so I can't fall back into that. So that, I think that was probably the hardest thing. If maybe if the money had been around in Como, if there wasn't all the match fixing and all the scandals, I could have still been out there. I always wanted to come back to England, always wanted to play football back over here. But at the same time, because it was going so well, I didn't want it to stop. The difficult thing is it just had to.
When you talk about the match fixing and stuff like that, did you know about it before you went over to Italy, and were you surprised at how rife it was?
Yeah, I was very surprised. I think I look at it now and think it doesn't surprise me now because of the amount of money that's in football. I look at it in non-league now. I've had a few people come up to me and say, "Do I know any dodgy goalkeepers?" And
really?
Yeah, you just think, well, no, I don't. But at the same time, if you become that type of person, and there are goalkeepers out there that then go and do that, and you're thinking, so easy to fix a game, which is terrible. It's not the sport that we play. It's not the sport that we want. But I think because there's so much money in it, because all these betting companies really fund it and pump it, and the difficult thing is that's what people are doing, aren't they? Their objective is to try and make money. So if they're going to try and do it that way, it's terrible. But it doesn't surprise me now that it happened. But we did have. I remember the manager came in, and this was late on. Obviously, we were in such bad money problems. I think this is why he did it. I think this is why it ended up happening. He came in and said, "We need to draw today's game."
Really?
Yeah, and it was just like, and it was a really strange one. No one took to it. No one went like, "Yeah, we'll draw." No one really at the same time was outraged because they hadn't been paid for months, so they didn't know what was going on. And we were a little bit like, "We're not going to do that. We're going to go out there and play the game." And the silly thing was, we did draw the game. As much as I know, no one was in on it. But at the same time, you never know. There could be that one player. There could be two players that maybe were a little bit, and to try and help someone get some money out of the game, which is terrible. But it doesn't. I think it probably still happens. It's not what we want in football, but like I said, it's such a global sport. There's so much money in it, so people look at it that way.
So you played really well at Como, like you said. Money wasn't quite there at Como. You did get that further year. Were you surprised that Inter didn't offer you a new deal at the end of that year, or did you already plan on leaving?
In my head, I planned on leaving. Obviously, if Inter Milan go and give you another deal, you probably don't leave. But I think you know when you're at these big clubs, and obviously at the time this was a treble-winning club. They'd won everything. They were top of the world. I think if you're realistic enough that you're not going to break into that first team. I was lucky enough to train with them for weeks and be a part of it and learn so much from them all. But you're not suddenly going to go out there and take Zanetti's place or something like this. You've seen these players as you're growing up. You're not going to go out and suddenly start playing in front of Wesley Sneijder and Diego Milito. So in my head, I was like, now I need to knuckle down. I've lived the dream. I've lived playing as an academy, as a reserve player at the best club in the world. Now is when it gets really difficult and you've got to knuckle down. Like I said, Como was where I was knuckling down. That's where my head was at, and it was going well. But once all that was going on and I realised there was so much difficult and problems in Italy at the time that I knew I just had to try and make my way back over here.
Just before we move on as well, you just mentioned that Inter Milan treble-winning team, which had some amazing players. What was Jose Mourinho like with you?
With me, he was good. He was really good, to be honest. He just always positive, always had a smile on his face. You get some managers that can be a bit arrogant, and he is arrogant. There's no denying that. But he's not arrogant in a way that he'd walk past you in the corridor. He'd always say hello. He'd always ask how things are going. And just those little niceties is what really helps you as a young player. It really makes you feel a little bit more welcome. And I remember he said to me, he went, and I think it was on the show actually that he said it. He said, your passion can only ever go up, knowing that I'm going to have downs in my career. I'm going to have ups and downs. But he said, just as long as your enjoyment and your passion just keeps going up and up and up, that is all that matters. And that's something that definitely, in my head, I still stick to now. I always try and say to the players that I coach now, that's all that's got. You've got to make sure you're enjoying it. The passion is still there, that you want to be playing football. You're happy with the standard you're at, and you keep doing it.
So you left Italy and you came back to England. You had some spells in Scotland as well. You're playing in non-league now. Why do you think it was that you never quite made it and cemented your place in professional football?
I think there's so many reasons that you could say. I think one thing that I'd always say, and that's probably why I've got into management so early, is you've got to get lucky with your managers. You've got to, at the end of the day, there's not saying I couldn't have done more. Maybe I could have done more. I don't look at it that way. I'm happy with what I've done. But at the same time, there's someone else that's in control of your career. It's not really down to you. If you get the opportunity on the pitch, then yeah, you've got to take the opportunity. But first of all, someone's got to give you that opportunity. And if I look back and go, when I came back over here, just before I signed for Inverness, I couldn't play for them that season because international clearance couldn't go through. So I had 13 weeks, I think it was, maybe not even quite that. I think it was like 11 weeks of the season. I was just thinking, I just need to play a bit of football. So I went and I had a phone call from Danny Cowley, and he was the manager of Concord Rangers in the Ryman Premier at the time.
It's crazy the journey that they've been on.
And I was just like, in my head, I was like, go on then, I'll do it for the 11 weeks. I know I've signed for Inverness. So all I need is somewhere just to keep ticking over and keep playing. And so I was more than happy to do that. And I remember he got so much out of me. In those 11 games, I think I got 15 assists and 4 goals. And we ended up getting promoted. We sort of went from being 8th or 9th in the division to suddenly we got in the playoffs, won the playoff semi-final, won the playoff final. And you get a really good buzz and a really good experience. And that's where I look back and go, he was a good manager for me. He was a really good manager for me. And if you then look at your career and go, but you've then moved on and you've left him as a manager, it becomes, right, I've now got to do it again with another manager. And obviously I went to Inverness and played under Terry Butcher, and wasn't the first time it's happened in my career. It's happened a few times afterwards. He's then left and a new manager comes in. And obviously a new manager wants his own players. He wants his new players. And I ended up being one of the unlucky ones that didn't play as much under the new manager. And then suddenly you've gone from all of this, like you're up there, you're loved by the manager, new manager comes in, and suddenly you're back down to the bottom again. You feel like you're starting over. And if I look at it and go, the year after Terry Butcher wanted me at Hibs, but he ended up losing his job. I then look at Danny Cowley, and he's now manager of Huddersfield Town in the Championship. And he took quite a few players with him on his journey. And I know, he knows, I probably would have been one of those players, but I couldn't because I've ended up going down a different path. And you have to, it doesn't beat me up. it doesn't bother me. I thought I made the right decision, and I was just unlucky that things changed in Scotland, and I was one of the lucky ones to be the one that it happened to. But I still just think I've enjoyed like I said, I enjoyed every moment, and I still tell everyone that year in Scotland was one of the best years in football, because all the boys were just together. We were all in the same position. We'd all have a night out together. We'd all stick together on the pitch. We'd all play a bit of golf after training, and it was just such a good life to be living. And that's when you're like, you are living the dream, because you're playing football in the morning. You're getting paid to play football. It's your living, and you get to go and do what you want in the afternoon, and you have a lot of time to yourself. So I've got no complaints with it.
How did you know what you wanted to do when you dropped into non-league, because you were playing part-time football then? How hard was it for you to think of having to do something else? Well, you do coaching now, but
Yeah,
to do something other than just playing football?
I'd always been a coach, so I'd started trying to coach when I was 14, and I did work experience at the Skills Academy, which I still do a bit of coaching for now. So I sort of knew that's where I was hoping to go anyway. I always knew it all along. I was like, I'll keep playing professional football till I can. I think I did it till about 23, 24. And then it came to still part-time football, where it's still your living. It's still enough money to make a living, but you've just got time to do other stuff. And that's the way I looked at it, going, so what am I going to do in my other time? And I knew it was always going to be within football. So it was a case, right now I'm going to start working on my badges, start improving as a coach, learning every aspect of coaching. That's one thing that I think I've done quite well so far. I've managed adult teams. I've managed every age group. Obviously, you start when you're first out. You start with the little ones. You start with the young ones, and it really improves you as a coach. And now, when I go to any session, no matter what age I'm coaching, I can adapt, and I'm ready for that. And having done a lot more stuff recently of academy coaching, and where I'm the academy manager at Dartford, it's setting me on that route now to start climbing the management side of things. I've still got quite a bit of playing time left, but I think the reason I came back to non-league was because once you've been out of the picture, and once I'd been in Italy, and then I had that pause in Scotland where I'd stopped playing. Once you've been out of the picture, clubs aren't that interested in you. Clubs aren't that interested in signing you. If you're the man of the moment and you're really hot at the time and you're scoring goals and people are noticing that, then suddenly any club goes for you. So in my head, I was used to non-league because that's where I started. Like I said, when I was 16, I was Welling. So maybe it was too easy to jump straight back down. I didn't have an agent at the time that might have been able to get me into football league clubs. So it ended up being people ringing me on the phone to them, and me just going, you know what? I had Jay Saunders at the time at Maidstone give me a call, and he just said, do you want to come down? We're building this club. Maidstone were in the Ryman Premier, and they'd just been promoted. They were getting 2,000 fans a game, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere to be a part of. And I knew it was a club that was on the way up. So it was definitely something I jumped into. That year we won the league as well. So it was something, maybe I did jump back into it, into non-league too easily. But if that's all you know and you don't have the right advice at that time, you do what you think's best at the time.
So you've got a few promotions under your belt as well. If you could go back and change anything because you've enjoyed it so much, would you change anything?
I've always said I wouldn't, because I've got no regrets with the way it was. I've loved every minute. I've got so many different stories to tell. So many. Obviously, I'm lucky enough to have a Champions League medal.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
So obviously, I wasn't in the squad or anything, but they were giving. I was part of it. I was part of the changing room, and they were giving the medals to all of us. So that in itself is just an unbelievable story to have. I think it would have been better for a footballing career had I have not taken the Inter Milan contract, which obviously you wouldn't do. You wouldn't do at that age. You're 16, 17. You've just won Football's Next Star, and to win, you get an Inter Milan contract. So if anyone was to turn that down, you'd think they're crazy. But Jamie Redknapp said to me at the time, he said, if I didn't win, I would have had a 2-year deal at Tottenham. And obviously you then look at it and go, if I wanted to play in England, if I wanted to be noticed more in England, which is what I did, then you do your 2 years at Tottenham, You come out at 19, 20. What clubs are going to have you then? If you don't make your way through Tottenham squad, you're then looking at Championship clubs, League One clubs, which is obviously where I would have liked to have been, where I would have liked to have actually learned a bit more of my trade. But that's the way football is. That's the way football is. There's so many different opportunities. Like I said, I could have chosen to follow Danny Cowley, and you never know, you could be in the Championship now. So it's one of them. You don't know what's going to happen. You can look back at it and go, "Oh, I wish I'd done that." But if you end up doing that way, then you start regretting everything, and you sort of lose the enjoyment, and you start thinking, where I'm playing in the Conference South, and I've been doing it for the last few years, I'm happy with that. I am. If I started regretting not doing other things, then I'd turn up on a Saturday and go, "What am I doing playing the Standard?" And then I wouldn't get the most out of myself, and then I wouldn't be able to put on the performances that I should do, and you end up actually dropping more. And as much as I know it's a drop for what's happened, but like I said, it's still my living. I still enjoy it. It brings in money, and I get to do what I love every week. And I've seen a lot of players that have dropped a lot lower, that have been meant to be the next big things, and actually been at the academy for their whole term, not just sort of won a TV show and signed. Then they've been at there for the whole term, and then they're not playing football at all anymore. So it is difficult. I think the mental health side of it, I'm quite lucky that I've got quite a strong head, but I do feel there's a lot of players out there that need that advice, need that guidance, because football is brutal. And I'm in a position now as Dartford Academy manager where I can only push a certain amount on, and we've got 50 kids in the academy, and obviously some of them you have to say goodbye to, and then some might not take it well, some might stop playing football completely, and that's not what you want. It's not what any of us want, but it's then who's got the right mentality to either go, "I'm going to prove you wrong," or go, "That's fine, I'll go to this place and I'm going to do my best there."
Just before we carry on with your career, I've just thought about when you were at Inter Milan, how did the other academy players, how did they react to you just winning a football club? Did they understand the concept? Did they understand why you were there?
I don't think so, because when you look at that time, especially in Italy, there's even now really, we've only just started getting the documentaries like Sunderland's Till I Die and the Man City ones. There's nothing in terms of reality in football. There's no TV shows that are really within football anyway. So it was definitely something different, and it makes you think it was the only reality TV show we'd had for years. And in Italy, it wasn't aired either. So that didn't really help my case, because had it been aired in Italy and all these Inter Milan fans had been looking at, then it becomes different. Then it becomes, "Oh, this is why he's here. This is who this English player is." But no, the players, when I spoke to them, they understood the concept, and they got it. And they always gave me a bit of stick, because they'd be like, "Oh, you're a celebrity in England," and things like that. And they go on like that. But so it's a good laugh and things. But yeah, you're right. I can't imagine being at a club now and going, "Oh, this guy's in as a TV show winner," because it doesn't sound right, does it? It doesn't sound.
No.
So in some ways, that probably holds you back for a little bit of time, because you're like, right, I've got to actually go and prove these. I'm not just a guy who's won a competition to be here. I've won a competition because I was good enough. So I've got to now show them that I'm good enough to be here.
So, in terms of your career, then, what would you say has been the best moment for you as a player?
It's a difficult one. I think realistically,
Like you say, you've had a lot of promotions, you've had a lot of
trophies
on league as well.
I think realistically, it has to be, because it's so surreal, is when I was with the Inter Milan squad, just like walking there on a match day. I remember being part of the team and just the semi-final against Barcelona. I remember I wasn't in the squad, but I was just behind it. And you're just like, what is going on here? You're thinking, we're in the semi-final against Bayern, watching Lionel Messi, Iniesta, all these players play against a team that I'm on the border of. And you're just thinking, tickets with your names on, just surreal stuff like that. And then 2 days later, you're going into training, and suddenly you're in a rondo with Lucio, Quaresma, Balotelli, and all these players that you've grown up seeing and knowing how good they are. And suddenly you're training with them week in, week out, and you're having a laugh with them. So I'd probably put that on on a different sort of side of things. It's not like an achievement, but obviously training like Nutmeg Vieira, that was probably one of the biggest achievements. Not many people say they've done
Not many,
that.
yeah, like you say, not many people can say that.
And I remember having an interview with him afterwards with like Inter Milan TV, and then he had his arm around me, giving me a bit of banter, saying I was doing well and things. So that in itself was probably one of the highest moments. If I was to say actual playing wise, there's been loads of different scoring against Wrexham and things like that, free kicks and things, but it probably was going back to that Danny Cowley era where I'd been flying with Concord Rangers, and Concord Rangers were such an underdog team. No one's heard of them. Not many fans. They're a club in Canby Island, and suddenly we're against all these clubs like Dulwich Hamlet and beating them. And it was in the final, probably getting the 2 assists to make us win 2-1. And it just sort of, I think that's one thing I found throughout my whole career, because I've been more of a winger. Sometimes sort of played through the middle. It's all been about the assists. It's all been about crossing the ball, deliveries, set pieces. And you never get the same credit as you do for scoring goals, because, like you're saying, if you look at your Wikipedia page or something like that, it all comes up saying who you played for, how many games,
and your goals, yeah.
Never says anything about the assists. But I think that's one thing that I've always really focused on, and I've really think, right, I'm turning up today to get an assist, and it's definitely something that's pushed me and sort of has kept me at this level, as getting those assists week in, week out.
I know I keep going back to it, but what was Balotelli like? Because you mentioned him then, and let's be honest, we all know about Mario Balotelli.
Yeah, I think that was when he was probably at his worst, because he was very naive, like really naive for the way he would act. I've got a few stories for him. I think first time I met him, other than training with him, he would always come and watch the reserves. He was good with that because he came from it. He came from the academy. And I remember he parked up in between the gates. It was an automatic gate, and he left his Lamborghini, so the gates kept almost hitting his Lamborghini and then going back again. So he blocked the whole driveway of the car park so that the team we were playing against couldn't come in. So they had to park out on their road and bring all their stuff in. The one where we saw him in town. He was walking about town with an AC Milan top on. And obviously the rivalry out there is ridiculous. And it's scary, really. It's scary when you get the San Siro game where it's AC Milan v Inter. That's a scary game. And he was walking in the streets asking for everyone to take photos of him, walking about in an AC Milan top. And you're thinking, what is going through his head? But the one where you really knew he didn't have the right guidance was the semi-final against Barcelona. He's a 21-year-old. Might have even been 21, might have been 20 years old, sitting on the bench. He comes on for the last 10 minutes. You've got through to the Champions League final. You've just beaten Barcelona. Everyone's buzzing in the San Siro. It's all going crazy. He takes off his top, spits on it, and throws it in the crowd. And just because he hadn't started the game. And you're thinking, this mentality, I understand that he wanted to play, but I don't know. Like, Mourinho managed to manage him just about, because he was the only one that would sort of kick up a fuss. All the other players were in awe of him. But you look at other clubs he's been at now, and managers can't handle him, because that's the way he is. He's such a nice guy, but at the same time, he just had a temperament about him where he'd switch and he wouldn't think what he was doing, and he'd quite often make the wrong decision and have to pay the price for it.
That is crazy. So what was it like in the change room after he'd done that? Or was everyone just buzzing that they got to the Champions League final?
He was more sort of stropping on his own in the corner, but players looked after him. Players didn't really have a go at him. They put their arm around him. I think they knew that he needed that bit of help. And at the same time, it was putting their arm around him. I think it was Zanetti that did go up to him and put his arm around him and just be like, just saying to him, look, Mario, we're in the Champions League final, mate. Like, laughing about it a little bit. You've got to keep your head. It doesn't look good when you do things like that. And I think the one thing that he's always, in all the clubs he's been at, he's upset a lot of fans, which is obviously what he did there. You're going to upset fans, you do that. I remember the City pre-season game, and it was his first pre-season game for City, and he's through 1-on-1, and he does that, tries running around the ball and tries flicking it in, and it misses.
Yeah.
And then like sort of waves his arm at the fans for booing him, and it's just like he is a good guy, and he does love football and things like that, and he is a very good player. But just those things obviously let him down, and I wouldn't even say it's his fault. It's just that's the way he is. He probably hasn't had anyone to go, you know what, I'm really going to look after you here, and I'm going to get the best out of you.
So, in terms of you, if I had to, you've played with some belting players, who would you say is the best player you've played with?
I'll go obviously. Well, actually, to be honest, I went to I was at Brighton in the development squad for a bit after Inter Milan, and Lewis Dunk was obviously he was a good player at the time, and I've got to give it because he was such a nice guy. I still would talk to him now. We got along really well, and to be fair to him, he was just so clued on and ready, and he bided his time. And I think that's one thing that maybe I couldn't do because I wasn't there for long. I wanted to play first team football. That's when I went up to Scotland after that. I wanted to play first team football rather than be stuck in an under-21 situation. But they looked after him, and he went the whole way through when they went League One up to the Prem, and then he slowly started getting more game time. And now look at him, he's captain for Brighton, and he's very much likely to be a centre half for England. So I think just as a mentality and as a good guy, I've got to say him to be one. I've said him a few times tonight. Zanetti's, for me, was the best player I've ever seen because the way he could run up and down the pitch at 39 years old, no one could get the ball off him. It was ridiculous, and his hamstrings were like this big. I couldn't get my head around how big his legs were. He's one person that in a running drill you didn't want to be coming against. But in non-league, it was Steve Cawley. I played with him at Concord Rangers for a season, and between us, I think we got 50 goals and 50 assists in one season, and we really set it alight. And it was probably the one time that, as a player myself, I got the most out of him, and he got the most out of me, and it just really worked. It was a little bit like a Dwight Yorke and Andy Cole situation where he'd do something, I knew what was going on. I'd do something, you know what's going on, and that is the hardest thing in football. I've played at so many clubs where you get the ball in a position, and you say if I'm on the wing and I do an early crossing behind the defenders, and then a forward suddenly looking for feet, and no one's to blame. You've done one thing, they've done the other. But when two players aren't on the same wavelength like that, then it becomes much more difficult to win a game of football. And when two players are on the same wavelength, it becomes completely different. You end up getting goals, you end up getting so many assists, you get so many chances in a game, and that was probably wasn't the highest standard of football. It was Conference South. It was for Concord Rangers, but at the same time, it was the best goal scoring and best assist season I've had, and I think he's had as well. So,
can you explain? How do you explain that type of partnership? Because obviously some players never get it. Yeah. Some players just find that one player where it just clicks, and
I think that is the best way to explain it. It does just click. It's not something you can train. It's not something you can work on. Because again, like after that season, I ended up I went to Hemel. I was a bit later on. I went to Hemel Hempstead, and I think they were much like they wanted me in the 10. I'd done so well in the 10 at Concord with Steve, and they were like, if you can do that here, we're going to win the league. So that was the plan. But then suddenly you're put with a different striker, and I remember thinking at the time that I couldn't get that partnership with that striker because I didn't know what he was going to do, and he was doing different runs that I wanted him to do. And I think that was the thing, is there's not much you can say to it. I think you've got to get along. Definitely got to get along. Like me and Steve got along really well. We talk now. We're still talking. We're doing Zoom and things like that now with all the boys. I think that's the main thing. Like day by day, we talk to each other. We talk about a game coming up. We'd both be in the same position, ready for the game. We'd warm up together and things. I think that sort of relationship is how it begins. But then for some reason, you're on the pitch, you've got to click. And I think we had the same sort of football mentality. We both wanted to play in the right way. And like you said, it just works. And I think if you ask a question to Andy Cole and Dwight Yorke, I'm not sure they'd be able to say it was because of this, it was because of that. But they just knew what each other were going to do. And they got the best out of each other.
So in terms of you looking forward now, obviously you're a keen golfer as well. But are you really set on going down the management route?
Yeah, I had a bit of a phase a few years ago where I think it was when I came into part-time football, and I thought I've played so much golf as a full-time footballer. Maybe I should have a little look into this avenue. And I sort of progressed with it a little bit and ended up becoming a professional golfer. And
what handicap? So what did you get down to before you went to pro?
I got down to one. I got down to a one handicapper, and then I thought, you know what? I've got the time. At the time, I was still coaching, but it wasn't full-time coaching as well. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a go, and I did my playing ability test, and after one round, they said, yeah, that's good enough. I think I was 2 under on the round. So I then started looking into doing my PGA, and I was doing my PGA, and I loved the playing side of it. The one thing I didn't like as much was like there were times when I was working in a golf shop or the retail side of things, the political side of things at a golf course, and that's what I wasn't interested in. So I knew myself. I stepped away from that a little bit and thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep playing. I'm going to enjoy playing. Not to a professional standard anymore, because at the same time I didn't have the time to do it, because if you want to enter any good standard competition, it's Thursday, Friday, and then if you make the cut, I can't then tell my football team, can't then go to them, look, I've got a round of golf this weekend. So maybe it's something I might continue more afterwards. I'm not sure, because I think everything in my head now is football. I want to keep on the path of football. I want to keep managing, keep coaching in football, but I've got down to +3 as a golfer, so it's definitely something that I enjoy doing. I try and do it as much as possible. Obviously, hard getting the time to do it, but definitely something that I'm enjoying and keep playing, and I am getting better. So maybe there is something there in the future. But if you look at what the serious pros are like, you know you're quite a way off them. Because, I mean, I was watching a recap of the Masters last night just because I'm a big fan of Tiger Woods.
Unbelievable story. I mean, I'm of 16, so you're probably a lot better than me. But
still, it's good going. It's good going. But like just watching Tiger play, and you're thinking, I try and do that. I feel like I can do that, but he does it every shot. He hits the ball 330 yards every drive, and you're just like, that's the difference you see. And the putts they're making. If you go out there on a day-to-day basis on a golf course and you see your mate with a 2.5 foot putt, there's a good chance he's going to miss the putt. Whereas them out there on the TV, they're doing that to 6 foot putts and making 6 foot putts look easy. And that's where I realised I wasn't a million miles away. If you have a good round, you can compete with them. But the consistency and the amount they work, like looking at Tiger Woods' regime, obviously I don't have the time to do that. Maybe if you put the effort in, you might be able to put the money into it and make money out of it. But he's out there 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. on the driving range, and for me, it's a sport I've enjoyed and I've got better at from just playing it.
So do you feel the career that you've had, the experiences that you've had as well, will you'll use perfectly and will fit you perfectly to be the manager that you feel that you needed as well?
Yeah, I think I've had so many different experiences, with managers as well, that it can only help me. I'm not saying I'm going to go out there and be the best manager. Obviously, I know how football works. You might suddenly feel like you've got a great team and things don't work, things don't click. But I've learned so much from all different aspects of football, different avenues of football in terms of the professional game, the top game, a little bit lower league stuff that I feel experienced. And also at the same time, like we were saying earlier, I've had the managers that can upset you or can kick you down to the bottom of the pile. So I think having that happen to me is something I make sure when I'm coaching now, I try not to do that to anyone at all. There's going to be players that aren't playing. There's going to be players that don't make the squad. But it's then how you deal with that. It's how you react to that yourself. And I feel like there's a lot of managers out there that might sort of take control and be powerful and think this is my opportunity and I'm in charge of you. Whereas the way I like to do it is I like to keep things very energetic. I try and get the most out of every single player possible. And then if the players aren't doing enough to be playing, then it's down to me. It's down to me to get more out of them. It's down to me to talk to them. It's down to me to find out a little bit more rather than push them off to the side and leave them out to dry. It's definitely something where I want to get the most out of every player that I coach, just because I know how it feels. And I've seen what's been successful with managers. Like I said, with Danny Cowley, I think he's out of them all. I know obviously of Jose Mourinho's man management skills was unbelievable. So that's something I'd like to take on. But Danny Cowley is so energetic as a manager, and he'd get the most out of every single player. And if you actually look at his career, I think in 11 years, he's gone from the Essex Prem and been promoted from every single league, pretty much every single league, and he's now in the Championship. So you think like that sort of thing doesn't happen. He's never had a season where it's dropped or it's come down, and that's because of the amount of work rate he puts in. He watches games every single night. He goes with his brother to a different team to watch a player, and if you put enough into it, then hopefully you get enough back out, and that's definitely one thing that I'll try and take on.
So a bit further down the line, maybe in a few years, would you be looking at maybe player manager role, or would you just go into management?
Yeah, I think putting a time scale on it's difficult. There's been times in my career and I'm like, I think it's coming. I'm like, I feel like it's around the corner, but then suddenly I turn up in pre-season, I'm the fittest player again. So I'm like, well, actually, I've got quite a lot left in my legs that I feel like I want to keep going. I want to keep playing as long as I can. So management can always happen at any time. I don't have to rush into that, and I don't want to rush into that. I want to finish out my career as playing. And then, yeah, like you said, I think it probably will get to a phase where I might join a club to manage them, but at the same time, I might play as well. That would probably be the most difficult part of it. I think even if I did manage to be successful and climb some leagues as a manager and get into maybe even the professional game, then I think the hardest part probably I'd still look back and say it would be to be a player manager, because I've played with them. I played with Jamie Day before. He was at Welling and he was player manager, and you've just got to be so consistent. You've got to be so steady, because if I ended up being a player manager on the wing, then you know what your wingers are like. Some days you might not beat a fullback, or his crosses might not be on point. Whereas if you're a CDM or a centre mid, it's much more easy to control the game, much more easy to go in the change room afterwards and say, this is why this is happening. So I've got to make sure that if I am a player manager, I'm comfortably good enough for that level, because if you're still sort of in and around the level, then it can get a bit awkward. I've seen that happen as well. So it's a decision that will be tough to make, because I don't want to stop playing, but it's at the same time to try and progress in the game of management. I think you've got to at some point, I'll have to put that first.
Well, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about your career today, and everything about it as well. So thank you for taking time out of your Saturday as well.
That's absolutely fine. No worries. Well, I don't know what day it is. So.
Yeah, that is true. I only know the day by the flap on a Thursday. That's exactly the way that I know. Yeah. So I hope everyone who's watched this has enjoyed just seeing where Ben's gone and where he's coming from, and then hopefully where he's going to go in the future as well. So this has been Ben Greenhalgh on Lives of the Game. Thank you everyone for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed it. Like the video. I'll leave some of Ben's links in the description below if you want to check him out as well. But thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.